Hi, this is Scott Bradfield, and this is um, a slightly different version, a different episode of Reading Great Books in the Bathtub. I'm in the middle of a trip and running around a bit, so I'm merging together two different venues for these lectures. One is the Reading Great Books in the Bathtub, and the other one is my Ultimate Beginner's Creative Writing course, which is taught independently from all those city lits and places that kept sending me such terrible students. And so I'm going to talk today as both a reader, which is the premise of the Bathtub series, and as writers, which is the premise of the Ultimate Beginners course. And I thought we would talk about the book we're reading in Ultimate Beginners this term, which is Charles Portis's The Dog of the South, and talk about paragraphs, one of my favorite topics of conversation when it comes to writing, and one of the most boring subjects. It sounds pretty boring, but it's not. It's not all boring. So she's a little bit more free form than usual. Charles Portis is still alive and has written possibly 5 or 6 of the funniest books ever written. I know you hear people say this is the funniest book ever written, but Portis wrote one funny book after another. He's most famous for True Grit, which has been turned into 2 cowboy pictures. So if you've seen True Grit, you don't understand Charles Portis at all, because he's just hilarious. And those have been turned into kind of John Wayne, Jeff Bridges movies. They don't communicate the humor of Portis. So he wrote five or six books, all of them as good as True Grit. And one of my favorites is Dog of the South. The other one is Masters of Atlantis, which is a hilarious send-up of the Theosophist movement and all the people who think they're being reincarnated and contacting the ethereal realm. So today I want to talk a little bit about something we talked about early in the Bathtub series, which is paragraphs. If you recall, and I'm sure not many of you were doing this, but if you've been following these lectures way back when, we did a little storyboard kind of thing on a blackboard. I tried to show you how paragraphs shift. So we might have the chew, and if that's isolated in a paragraph, as readers, we don't need to be told all the boring things that most boring writers try to do, such as the giant train was coming down the track. It was heading towards Santa Fe because it was this endless diatribe of just dull information that so many bad writers and struggling students keep pouring onto the page. Choo does it. Choo is the train. And then maybe another paragraph would be an image of the sky. Another paragraph might be dialogue. Another paragraph might be interior reflection. The paragraph is a unit of narrative which allows us to skip all the crap. And all the crap is what many of my students and many published writers are filling their pages with. Just the crap that you just don't need, because the paragraph has narrative and cinematic qualities to each unit. And you don't need to think like a mathematician when I say unit. You just recognize the different things paragraphs do when you write a story. So let me look at a couple of passages in Portis, because he uses paragraphs in a way that will mislead many aspiring writers. The biggest problem I have with people learning how to write is that they use paragraphs to load information to present to the reader. Or they jump around so much from one paragraph to another that you can't see the continuity between the paragraphs. So what Portis does is he'll often use the paragraph in a conventional way. So for example, let's look briefly at page 13, 12 to 13. I won't read this, but you can see this blocked out in the way normal paragraphs and narrative work. Something that, again, many of my students just don't look at. You'll have an entire paragraph which is from one person talking, and then we might see that person as they're talking. We might hear what they're thinking as they talk, but that paragraph is organized around this one act, this one expression. Then we'll have some other narrative bits where the character might think about what was said. Then we'll get back to the dialogue. And then the most conventional use of the paragraph in narrative is I said, he said. And each of those paragraphs is organized around what I say and what you say. But they're also organized, if I'm the point of view, around what I said and what I see, or what I hear, or what I smell. Okay, this is no-brainer stuff. I'm telling you all the obvious things. Now, that's a huge part of narrative and a very easy thing to learn. But I wanted to show how Portis uses paragraphs in a way which is very successful as little stories. And he thinks about every one of his paragraphs, as you should, as a little story that has a beginning and an end. So you got a little kicker at the beginning of the paragraph and a little kicker at the end. The paragraph is not organized to provide information to your readers. Okay, it's there to entertain them and to move them on to the next paragraph. So, for example, the opening paragraph, which is a perfect opening paragraph, the first line is, my wife Norma had run off with Guy Dupree, and I was waiting around for the credit card billings to come in so I could see where they had gone. Okay, so there's a great opening line to a paragraph. It's a great opening line to a novel. You want a real kicker at the beginning of your novel. But most of his paragraphs start off with a kicker like that, get you into it. Now, listen to this paragraph. It's a little story. It's not piles of information and crap and ideas that the writer has about doing later. It's one little story, and each sentence takes us further along in the story. My wife Norma had run off with Guy Dupree, and I was waiting around for the credit card billings to come in so I could see where they had gone. I was biding my time. This was October. They had taken my car and my Texaco card and my American Express card. Dupree had also taken from the bedroom closet my good raincoat and a shotgun and perhaps some other articles. It was just like him to pick the .410, a boy's first gun. I suppose he thought it wouldn't kick much, that it would kill or at least rip up the flesh in a satisfying way without making a lot of noise or giving much of a jolt to a sleeping monkey shoulder. Opening, they've run off, and now we're waiting in this life over a period of weeks probably, and as we sit there waiting, we are the character thinking about what's happened to us, what has been taken, and that jerk who took my wife away, and his monkey shoulder closed the paragraph. Now that's a story. You may not hear it, but it's definitely a story with a conclusion. The next paragraph, when the receipts arrived. If I could, again, I often sometimes when I'm teaching my creative writing course, I just want to just grab my students and just shove their noses in those two paragraphs. It moves us from one narrative moment to another. Usually the next narrative moment. We're waiting for them to come. They arrived at the very beginning of the next paragraph, because that's the kicker again, what's getting us into the paragraph. So he's always thinking about this. Now, if you read the opening paragraph pages of Dog of the South, as many of my students think it's giving us information. It's not. It's setting us up in a story. We're waiting to find out where Guy Dupree went, and then we're going after him. The story starts in the beginning, and we're waiting to get moving. We're not popping around in time. Now, in these first few pages, we're going to get passages where sometimes beginning writers are going to think, oh, he's popping around in time. But he's not. He's going to have reflections on this character as he moves forward. But each of those paragraphs is going to be based around one period or one event. So it's not just going to be flashback, 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 information, information, information. There's going to be little stories in here. Now, for example, on page 5, we have the man sitting in his house reflecting on why his wife left him, Norma. And he does a lovely little 2 paragraphs here. I'm going to read these for you right now. And it's going back in time. He's remembering why his wife left him. I should have paid more attention to Norma. Opening sentence, bang, we're hooked into it. I should have paid more attention to her. That's what this little paragraph is about. I should have talked to her and listened to her, but I didn't do it. A timely word here and there might have worked wonders. I knew she was restless and anxious to play a more active part in life. She spoke in just those terms, and there are other signals as well. So there's a little paragraph about not paying enough attention, and there were these other signals, bang, and now we start the next paragraph. And here's the signals. She announced one day that she wanted to give a party in our apartment with a theme of Around the World in 80 Days. I couldn't believe my ears. A party? She talked about applying for a job as stewardess with Braniff Airlines. She bought a bicycle, an expensive multi-geared model, and joined a cycling club against my wishes. The idea was that she and her chums would pedal along leafy country lanes, shouting and singing like a bunch of Germans. But from all I could see, they just had meetings in the damp basement of a church. A little story. She had all these things. She wanted to do this thing, this thing, this thing. She was trying to find some way out of her life. At the end, she was going to do these big things with her bicycle, but all he sees is this damp basement. It's a story. So he's thinking in a story every paragraph, and they're often these kind of narrative paragraphs. The large bulk of this book are paragraphs just like that, that will occasionally move into narrative, conversational, event-driven scenes. But a lot of the book are these reflective paragraphs or these series of event paragraphs where a number of things happen to the narrator. But he knows what his paragraph's about from the first sentence. And this is, again, another thing I'm constantly trying. My students will have one idea at the beginning, and then another idea will come along, and then another idea, and then someone will come into the paragraph and start saying something. And the notion that that paragraph has its own idea about how to exist from the first sentence is important. I'll read one last one. This is about how Dupree goes crazy about politics. And again, it's a little longer, but it's about after Dupree gets mad about something in politics, he starts writing letters to the president, and these get him in trouble with the police, which is why he's run off to Mexico with Norma. And here's one more paragraph. Listen to the beginning, opening sentence, bang. We're into the paragraph. Those kicker openings, you want a paragraph that gets you interested in the paragraph, and then you follow through with the idea. He wrote abusive letters to the president, calling him a coward and a mangy rat with scabs on his ears, and even challenged him to a fistfight on Pennsylvania Avenue. This was pretty good coming from a person who had been KO'd in every beer joint in Little Rock, often within the first minutes of his arrival. I don't believe we've ever had a president, unless it was Tiny James Madison with his short arms, who couldn't have handled Dupree in a fair fight. Any provocation at all would do. One of his favorite ploys was to take a seat at a bar and repeat overheard fatuous remarks in a quacking voice like Donald Duck. Or he would spit BBs at people. He could fire BBs from between his teeth at high velocity, and he would sit there and sting the tender chins and noses of the drinkers with these little bullets until he was discovered and, as was usually the consequence, knocked cold as a wedge. Closed paragraph. Now, there isn't always just one event, which is really what most paragraphs will be based around. He will have these sort of reflective paragraphs, which is what most of my students are always trying to do, but they're just bumbling around, just putting information in. And he starts with an idea. The character might reflect a bit about it, but when he comes to the end, it's all about Dupree starting fights and can't finish them. So it's a little story. Now, you have to have that kind of narrative coherence in a paragraph, or within seconds you lose the reader. So there's a lot of reasons for reading Dog of the South. When you read it, be careful of these paragraphs. Don't try to imitate him right away, because he's very good at what he does. And I mainly, as a bathtub read, you can't find a book that will make you laugh. You'll laugh loud in the bathtub. The people in the next door will hear you laughing in the bathtub if you're reading Dog of the South. Okay, all right. So that's my joint lecture bathtub reading essay today. And I think the next bathtub reading, we're going to find another big formidable book just to test our mettle. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.